Death on Clare Island, Chapter 6. There wasn't a parking space to be found on Kingsbridge Street as I drove past the restaurant. Further up the narrow incline of what I considered more of a lane than a street, I could see lines of people along the sidewalk outside Cody's funeral parlor. That explained the parking problems. Finally, I found a spot several blocks away and worried I'd be late. I grabbed my keys from the ignition and rushed to the Davitt. The restaurant is named for the Irish rebel Michael Davitt. From what I've read, we were like-minded on many things, mostly the fact that he fought for his ideals. Blood poisoning is what finally got him in 1906. I chose the dining room entrance rather than the pub door and looked around for Bridget. She was seated in one of the booths, folding up a bundle of papers that she then placed into her handbag. She glanced up, spotted me, and waved. As I sat down across from her, I noted that she was dressed in a white silk blouse, tailored navy jacket, and black pants. It struck me that she wore her clothes like a uniform. She'd been clad similarly when we spoke on Clare Island, giving me the impression that her idea of dressing for success meant practical and ready to go. Aunt Georgina had filled me in on other details about her, including the Sumner family business, a button mushroom farm outside of Castle Bar. Bridget, who was 30 and single, managed the operation. After exchanging pleasantries, we requested salad plates and a basket of brown bread. I also added a bowl of the homemade vegetable soup to my order. As soon as the waitress delivered our meals, Bridget directed the conversation to the matters at hand. My brother wasn't a drug user, she said right off as she tapped the table with her finger. I don't care what the toxicology report says. How can the Garde believe that he used drugs? They didn't even bother to find out more about him. She pursed her lips and looked down at the table before she continued. He was a vegetarian, an animal rights activist, a volunteer, and a religious person. Drugs were foreign to his beliefs. That's not how he lived his life. She raised her left hand toward the ceiling as she finished her sentence. Well, what else would people think? I countered. The circumstantial evidence certainly supports the police verdict. He had drugs on his body when he was found. He also had a gash on his head, and people noticed him walking around the harbor late at night and before sunrise. Not giving her a chance to respond, I threw out another question. What about his boat? My eyes held hers while I watched her reaction. She maintained the connection. Boat? She hesitated, saying the word slowly. Matthew didn't own a boat. Did he have access to one? People noticed him around those coves. Well, the family owns a boat, and he borrowed it a few times. I'd take it out to him on the island and return on the ferry. There was a brief silence before she continued. He wanted to take Sharon, his fiancée, out on the water during the long summer evenings, especially on the weekends when they both had a break from work. It was innocent, nothing more. Besides, he hadn't used the boat in several weeks. She used her fork to push her salad around her plate. Is it equipped with mapping devices? I went on. I wasn't ready to let the subject go. She shrugged and cast her eyes away from me. Yes, the boat has a reliable GPS system. Her voice, I noticed, now lacked its previous intensity. Where is the boat kept? Near Runa Key in Lewisburg, where the Clare Island ferry docks, she snapped, shooting a look at her watch. Ignoring her testiness, I repeated my original question. What else should people think about what happened? I also made a mental note to look at the boat when I returned. Bridget sighed. Okay, I hear what you're saying about the circumstantial evidence, but Matthew wanted to be an artist since he was 4 years old. When it occurred to my parents that his taste for art and beautiful things was impractical, I encouraged him to follow his dreams. I supported him at art school when my parents refused. She emphasized the word I as she simultaneously raised her left hand toward the ceiling. It was a gesture she'd used before, which seemed to be her way of stressing a point. Having demolished my soup and bread, I nodded for her to continue. He spent 4 years in New York going to school, had a show at Columbia University's Art Center in 1990, and taught art at Dublin College for 2 years when he returned from the US. She ticked off his accomplishments on her fingers as she spoke. He'd just begun to make a name for himself restoring historical period paintings when he met Sharon. He moved back to Castlebar to be closer to her and devote more time to art history restorations. He was too dedicated to make a stupid mistake that could cost him his career. He had no time for drugs. Her voice had raised an octave and her face was flushed by this point. Okay, then what other explanation is there for the evidence? I prompted. I don't know the answer to that, which is why I want to hire you. Talk to Raymond Nolan. He heads up Save the People, where Matthew volunteered when he wasn't on Clare Island or with Sharon. Once again, she lifted her hand toward the ceiling. What exactly does this group do? I asked. A fundamentalist group whose mission is to stamp out drug use, especially by children and teenagers. Matthew volunteered there for several years and he actively participated in fundraising events. She sighed. I didn't agree with this part of his life. I mean, being surrounded by people with drug dependencies can't be good for you. But he wouldn't listen to me. I settled back against the velvet-covered booth and wondered about her motives, not regarding her brother's death, but his life. Had she believed that much in his talent? Enough to risk her relationship with the rest of her family? It was unusual for a sibling to actively finance another in the face of parental disapproval. What had she to gain by encouraging Matthew's art career? She'd stayed close to home, so close that she oversaw the family business. Did she really want to know what happened to her brother, or was she seeking exoneration? She suggested I meet Sharon. What he saw in her, I can't fathom. I pleaded with him to break it off with her several times. He refused. I nodded, but said nothing. Listening, I have found, is the best way to understand someone. Okay, you're going to think I was a jealous and controlling sister, never happy with her brother's girlfriends. That was not my motive. He's 5 years younger than I am. I felt responsible for him. But something's just not right with Sharon. She didn't even come to his funeral service. And she's been saying that she's not surprised about the drugs. I don't understand it. He worshiped her and would have done anything for her. I called her and asked her to contact the Gardaí, request them to take a closer look at what happened to Matthew. She refused. Says she doesn't have time to waste on useless discussions with a woman who didn't even know her brother. Says Matthew kept secrets. Bridget exhaled deeply as her shoulders slumped. Sharon has something to do with this. I just know it. What am I going to do? First, Matthew wouldn't confide in me, and now Sharon has shut me out. Oh, God, I must have appeared so much like my parents to him at this point. She went back to smoothing the sleeves of her blouse. When was the last time you spoke with Matthew? Just a few days prior to... She turned away rather than say it. He wanted to know if I'd loan him some money. I went out there, but he wouldn't tell me anything, just said that he had to raise cash. She fixed her gaze squarely on me. So, are you going to help me or not? I released a long, deep breath, fidgeting with the keys I'd put on the table when I arrived. When I didn't answer right away, she said, I hope SOB doesn't mean what I think it might. It was the first time that evening her voice carried a hint of lightness. What? I realized then that she'd taken notice of my personalized keychain. No, it stands for Star O'Brien. But I'll admit I like the play on words. I smiled. Okay, look, I can interview Matthew's friends and use my research company to follow up on information I uncover. But I don't know how much good that will do. You still need to be prepared for bad news. Bridget pulled her long black hair back from her face. It was then that I noticed her red-rimmed eyes. For the first time that evening, she looked like a fragile young woman rather than a successful businesswoman. Did you loan him the money, by the way? I asked. No, and don't ask me why I didn't. Maybe I'd gotten tired of playing the part of a surrogate parent, but I wish I had. Maybe he'd still be alive. Look, Matthew was my brother, Miss O'Brien. I loved him. He wasn't the person that everyone is describing, and I think that should be made clear. Please, find the truth. Opening her purse, she produced a check and pushed it across the table. This is for you, she said. Picking it up, I read my name and the amount of 10,000 euros. Then I slid the check back across the table. I can't take this from you. Not right now, at least. I'll see what I can find out and keep track of extraordinary expenses. In the meantime, please get me the key to Matthew's apartment and written permission to board your family's boat. I'll let you know if I learn anything of interest. She nodded, pursing her lips as she picked up the check. I'm sorry for your loss, I said as I rose from the table. As I departed from the restaurant, I took a look back and saw that she remained seated, staring down at the check.